Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's November 5th, 2022, and we are in the New Testament, and we are in the book of John, and we're going to read chapter 2 today. All right, so who was John? Well, he and his brother James were called the son of thunder. They were some of the first disciples that Jesus called. Uh, John, James, and Peter were the three main disciples that Jesus hung out with, and whenever Jesus wanted to show something to a small set of his disciples, it was usually those three. uh, John is also called the beloved of Jesus, so he was a best friend. He ended up being Jesus' best friend, basically. So there was a closeness and a personal bond there between those two. As such, we get a much different picture of Jesus in John's gospel than we do in any other place in the Bible. John wants us to see, he wants us to see that Jesus was the Messiah and that he was divine, but he also wants us to see that human side of Jesus too. He wants us to maybe give a little more of the behind the scenes. And we see that in this section we're getting ready to read, chapter 2, because we start off with the wedding and Jesus turning the water into wine. And John kind of walks you through that whole step of like, okay, you know what? I know there was no wine. I know he told me to grab a jar, and I grabbed a jar, and it was empty, and I put water in it, and then everyone drank wine out of it. And I'm not sure how that happened other than, whoa, this is a miracle. So he wants you to see that part of it. He also talks about cleansing the temple and Jesus going to Jerusalem, and John's gospel, all the other gospels mention it one time. John wants you to see that he does that. He always went to the for Passover, apparently always went to Jerusalem. And the big complaint he always had was going into the temple and going into that courtyard of the Gentiles, where the Gentiles were supposed to be allowed to go in and worship God, and seeing that there's people buying and selling and the Gentiles can't get in. And he would throw them all out. And every year he would come back and have to do it again, which culminated in the final one on the week before he dies. So again, we're getting a different view of Jesus, and now we're getting it from the guy who probably stood next to Jesus most of his adult life and all throughout his preaching. So it's not that we're getting a different story, we're just getting a different view of it from a different perspective. So let's go ahead and we're going to read John chapter 2. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding as well. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother told him, "They don't have any wine." "What does it have to do with you and me, woman?" Jesus asked. "My hour has not yet come." "Do whatever he tells you," his mother told the servants. Now 6 stone water jars had been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 or 30 gallons. "Fill the jars with water," Jesus told them. So they filled them to the brim. Then he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the head waiter." And they did. When the head waiter tasted the water, after it had become wine, he did not know where it came from. Though the servants who had drawn the water knew, he called the groom and told him, "Everyone sets out the fine wine first, then after people are drunk, the inferior, but you have kept the fine wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum together with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there only a few days. The Jewish Passover was near, and so Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling oxen, sheep, and doves, and he also found the money changers sitting there. After making a whip out of cords, he drove everyone out of the temple with their sheep and oxen. He also poured out the money changers' coins and overturned the tables. He told those who were selling doves, "Get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace." And his disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So the Jews replied to him, "What sign will you show us for doing these things?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days." Therefore the Jews said, "This temple took 46 years to build, and you'll raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the statement Jesus had made. While he was in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, many believed in the name when they saw signs he was doing. Jesus, however, would not entrust himself to them, since he knew them all, and because he did not need anyone to testify about man, for he himself knew what was in man. May God bless the reading of his word. May God bless you. Bye.